If I am dissatisfied with my performance and my partner is too, then I have a case of premature ejaculation. Now, if I last 1 minute but I'm satisfied and so is she, then we don't have a case of premature ejaculation. The main cases of premature ejaculation, for example, are physiological. Often when the patient has, for instance, diabetes or blood pressure problems, this really ends up causing premature ejaculation. Now, the vast majority of situations we encounter are primarily psychological in nature, right? It is more about anxiety getting in the way. The biggest complaint men have is about premature ejaculation and erectile dysfunction. That's their main concern. And there are a lot of myths, a lot of nonsense talked about this on the internet. A lot of people, in fact, use products that don't work. It's very common to see gels, sprays, pills, a bunch of so-called miracle solutions that don't actually work. But without a doubt, the main complaints are those two issues. If we had to list the top two, it would be premature ejaculation and erectile dysfunction. And it's very common, for example, premature ejaculation affects about 30 to 40% of men, right? But no one talks about it, do they? Because it's something that causes a lot of shame, a lot of embarrassment, so men really do feel a certain shame even to mention it to their friends. So if we imagine a group of 10 people, like in a game, a soccer team, 3 or 4 of them will have some kind of erectile dysfunction, right? And the vast majority of cases are psychological, right? Yeah, the main cases of premature ejaculation, for example, are physiological. Often when a patient has, for example, diabetes or blood pressure problems, this really ends up causing premature ejaculation. Now, the vast majority is more psychological, right? It's more about anxiety that ends up getting in the way.
There's also a behavioral aspect, habits and so on, which I think end up having an influence. And it's great that men are increasingly finding this safe space to share something that, from what you're saying, is so common. I'm even surprised that the statistic is so high among men, but it really is still a taboo that's rarely talked about, right?
Most men take almost 10 years to seek help, you know? I have patients who have destroyed relationships, the woman. There comes a time when the woman loses patience, right? Because the level of arousal, the arousal curve for women is slower than for men, right? So sometimes the man in 30 seconds is already ready to start penetration. And women take much longer, right? You need to warm her up more there. So imagine that sometimes the guy is ejaculating. In more severe cases, he hasn't even penetrated yet and he's already ejaculating. There are some really severe cases where the anxiety is so intense that just from rubbing, he already ejaculates. It's a curious fact because nowadays we don't measure premature ejaculation by time. We used to say 1 minute is premature, not now. Today, we talk about it in terms of dissatisfaction. If I'm dissatisfied with my performance and my partner is too, then I have a case of premature ejaculation. Now, if it's 1 minute but I'm satisfied and so is she, then we don't have a case of premature ejaculation. So that's something important to note, right? And this delay in seeking help, men tend to put it off until they can't anymore. So there are cases that last 10, 12 years, and they really only seek help when many times the relationship has already been destroyed, the situation has worn out, because the woman also feels embarrassed to talk about it, right? To say, look, it's complicated, I'm not able to be satisfied in bed. So it's a very embarrassing situation. The guy really ends up feeling like garbage. If you want to see a man destroyed, it's when he's having this kind of difficulty in his intimate relationship.
It gets in the way of the relationship as the understanding of what's happening becomes clear. The woman doubts if it's a relationship issue or something with her. It affects the man's self-esteem and the woman's too. Often there's no clear communication amidst the embarrassment. And as you said, men sometimes take a long time to seek help in general with various health issues, right, in general. And it's interesting because I thought that when it comes to sexuality, since this is a problem that often creates issues in the relationship, maybe men would be a little more attentive. But no, since it's something very, very intimate, there's also another layer of silence that we need to overcome. You mentioned the issue of anxiety, and I started thinking about how it affects men, even when they finally want to seek help, the anxiety to solve it quickly. And today I noticed that there are a lot of products on the market promising to solve especially issues like premature ejaculation and so on, with sprays, pills, gels, little products for people to use. But do these actually work? Are they effective at...
No, because premature ejaculation doesn't originate in the head of the penis. So there's no point in applying a serum there, for example. Some people use a serum, a spray, a condom with a numbing effect, right? Or a gel with a numbing effect. That can desensitize both her and him. Ejaculation doesn't originate in the head of the penis. If that were the case, for example, circumcised men wouldn't have premature ejaculation, which isn't true. Of course, sensitivity can help. It can be a contributing factor. In fact, we even recommend a bit of tantric massage on the glands to help improve this hypersensitivity of the glands. But by itself, it's not responsible because the main cause of premature ejaculation is often very quick masturbation that men do throughout their lives so they won't get caught by parents, family members, or even during marriage right there with their wives. Absolutely anything we do repeatedly over and over again and very quickly becomes a conditioning. Absolutely anything we do with our bodies repeatedly and very quickly will eventually become a conditioning. So literally men train themselves for premature ejaculation without realizing it. And then they want to solve it with a pill. Do you see how there's a disconnect from reality? And of course, there are a lot of people, a huge million-dollar industry, profiting from this. They say, use this little drop, you'll get a bigger dick, you'll have better erections, you'll solve premature ejaculation, you'll become a bull in bed. Gel, tea, spray, there are so many things. For example, desensitizing gel. That can also desensitize your partner. He goes numb, she goes numb, sensitivity decreases, pleasure decreases, even though there are actually techniques for reversal, right? Because if you train yourself to reach a goal, right, to ejaculate quickly, you can also train to have that control by becoming aware of your body, learning to oxygenate your body, learning to notice your level of arousal, right? Another thing that happens very often is that men masturbate at night to relieve daily anxiety and stress. This is quite common. At night, right before bed, to relax, they go and masturbate. And what are we training the brain to do with this? At the slightest sign of anxiety or stress, ejaculate to relax. So during sex, the guy who sometimes gets anxious about his performance, which is very common, guys get anxious because, yes, they have to perform, they have to be the alpha, the virile one, the body, the brain understands, oh, he's anxious, let's ejaculate so he can calm down. So that's another kind of conditioning. On top of that, we add the daily anxiety and stress. Everyday stress, anxiety, you eat fast, drive fast, do everything fast. Anxiety releases adrenaline and cortisol into the bloodstream. And these two hormones are draining. They're the fuel for premature ejaculation. So they're going to make you ejaculate quickly or make you lose your erection, right? So the first thing we teach my patients is calm down, breathe, right? Because sex is meant to be savored, not devoured. I really like to use these terms, savor and devour, because that's what happens. A lot of times people watch adult videos their whole lives, thinking that pleasurable sex is about violence, about force, about performance, about the act itself, and sometimes they forget that pleasure is often found in the subtle things. Hold on, connect with your partner. Oh, you feel like you have to get somewhere. Relax, connect, feel her body, feel your own body. Do you really need all this rush, this performance? Or can you savor it, feel it, and connect in a different way, you know?
I'm really curious to understand what this training is like and to learn more about the massages. We'll talk about that in a moment, but I keep thinking about the consequences of this market and of this quick fix consumption we have for a solution that seems miraculous, as you were mentioning, but that doesn't actually work. I start thinking about how this frustration is internalized by someone facing physical, emotional, psychological, and relational problems, who then buys a product that promises everything but delivers nothing. That frustration and anxiety grow, sometimes leading to a depressive state or melancholy that affects these men, right? And then I notice that sometimes some urologists, anyway, even prescribe antidepressants. How do these medications relate to these cases?
Well, the antidepressant has merely a palliative effect. It won't actually solve the problem. The antidepressant is a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. This will help the patient who is using this medication feel much more relaxed, because the serotonin remains active within the body for longer and they become calmer. This can indeed have a beneficial effect, but it's still a medication. First, it won't work for everyone, and this person isn't actually depressed. It's a strong medication that you'll need to use continuously, and it has side effects. And one of the main side effects is decreased libido, which can happen. You see, sometimes you try to fix one thing and actually end up causing harm in another way. It's like you pull the blanket from one side and uncover the other. So it doesn't really make sense, literally. Not to mention that it doesn't always work, right? It can cause you to feel dizzy and lightheaded, and there can be a series of various side effects that will be harmful to this man's health, right? And that's the thing. Sometimes we really want something magical, a magic trick, right? Of course, sometimes medication is necessary. I'm not saying you shouldn't see a doctor. It is important to consult with your doctor, get regular checkups, and make sure your testosterone levels are okay. Check for diabetes and blood pressure issues, because those things really do interfere with your performance. But we need to take responsibility for our own general health and not just our sexual health. For example, there are a lot of men, this is actually quite common, okay? This issue of tricks, right? Of self-sabotage. For example, distracting your thoughts, which ends up disconnecting you. You're supposed to be connected with your partner and you start thinking about your naked grandmother all saggy and wrinkled, I don't know.
Or about the bill that needs to be paid?
Man, you're going to disconnect and the sex is going to be terrible. And another thing, a lot of men masturbate before having sex. So knowing they're going to meet their partner, they're afraid of ejaculating too quickly, so they masturbate at home beforehand to reduce the chance of ejaculating quickly. There are two big mistakes here. First, he might not have a good erection because the older a man gets, the longer the refractory period becomes. What is that? It's the recovery time between one ejaculation and another. So if you're young, maybe it even works because young guys have a lot of energy. They recover faster, right? They ejaculate and 2 minutes later, they're ready for another sexual encounter. But for older guys, that's simply not the case. They really need a longer recovery time. And if you end up completely drained, without energy, it's going to take you longer to really get fully aroused, to be well and truly stimulated for sex. It doesn't work, right? Sometimes it can even harm the relationship, and who can guarantee you won't have erection problems during sex? You just came, your body thinks you've already fulfilled your reproductive function, and there's no guarantee you'll be able to have a second round. So these are techniques that don't work.
It seems there are scientifically proven reversal exercises for premature ejaculation, and you teach a method for people to include this in a healthy routine. Is that right?
Exactly. Men are often embarrassed to seek help at a health clinic, and many times in-person treatment at a clinic is very expensive. A serious clinic can cost 2,000 or 3,000 Rs. So what did I do? I recorded all the exercises, the entire detailed framework of scientifically backed reversal exercises as if it were a course, like several consultations where he watches and practices with full support. So the method is actually called the APM Method, the High Male Performance Method, where he keeps training consistently. He watches the lesson and practices, watches and practices. The body needs at least 21 days to form a new habit. Science says it takes between 21 and 60 days to form a new habit. Because there's something interesting, Jane, which is the point of ejaculatory inevitability. What is that? Is the point of no return. It's the limit, where after passing this point, no man in the world can control ejaculation. So what's the big secret to ejaculatory control? It's the guy noticing when he's getting close to that limit. And when he's getting close to that limit, he pulls the handbrake. Calm down, breathe, relax, control yourself, use the muscles there to lower that level of arousal. So in the training, basically, we teach two pedals. One to accelerate when I want to increase the level of arousal, and one to brake when that level of arousal is already too high. So it's just like driving a car, using the pedals where you accelerate and brake. After a lot of practice, this ends up becoming automatic. And then as he plays along with his partner, he looks at her and says, she's highly sexually aroused, she's about to have an orgasm, so now I'm allowed to go along with her. And then it's the best of both worlds, right? That's when the bells ring, the angels say amen. And then it really is something special, right? When both reach that point together. So it's practice, really. There's nothing out of this world about it. It's easy, it's enjoyable to do. It seems complicated, but it's actually enjoyable to do. We teach control of arousal and orgasm. It's not going to be a boring practice, but it does need to be done so that you get to know your body, so that you look inward, master the techniques, and master all the muscle control. You'll even learn how to have stronger erections, because what happens is this. Untreated premature ejaculation often develops into a dysfunction problem. Before starting sex, the guy already knows about his premature ejaculation. So he already goes in anxious, already goes in nervous. Next thing you know, he's having trouble with erections. For the erection to happen, he needs to be relaxed. He needs to activate the parasympathetic system to achieve this relaxation. And if he's nervous, he's in fight or flight mode, it's over. The blood goes to the areas of the body needed for escape. So the legs, right? The vital parts for you to react, defend yourself, run away, and do whatever needs to be done to protect yourself, not to the penis. That's why it's very common for a guy who doesn't treat premature ejaculation to end up with erectile dysfunction. This is quite common. So no one teaches men how to have better relationships. We learn through experience, and often we learn from adult videos. And adult videos often teach violence. They teach
Speed,
a super performance. Then the guy watches an adult video and thinks, oh, but my dick isn't as big as that guy's. Then he starts idealizing the woman, the way she is treated, the way things are supposed to be. But is what you see in adult films really what happens in actual real life? Well, see, do women actually want to be treated in that particular way? And it's cool because as you start doing the exercises in the first few days, if you put the anxiety control techniques into practice, you already notice an improvement. Because it's literally like a natural tatalafil. We even have a class both with a physical therapist and a class about foods that stimulate erections. So it's really a complete training program, truly for high performance, you know. Everything a guy needs is covered in various techniques, from tantra to physical therapy. So it's about equipping him with advanced scientific methodology so he can significantly improve his relationship.
Wonderful. And opening this portal of self-discovery and self-knowledge of one's own body, of one's own being, right? Diego, I want to understand how people can access this course and also how they will be able to reach you through the course. Is there this space for interaction with you? How will people engage with this content?
Absolutely. Just because it's online doesn't mean people will be left unsupported, right? So they will have access to all the techniques, and whenever they have a question, they can reach out on WhatsApp or ask their questions directly within the course itself, okay? Just because it's online doesn't mean there won't be support. There is support for clarifying doubts. The course is on the Hotmart platform, which is an international course platform, so there's a full guarantee, 6 or 7 days of guarantee. Does it work for everyone? It works for those doing the exercises. It's like going to the gym. People ask, how do I know it'll work? It's the same question you could ask at a gym. Will it work for me? Are you going to do it? Are you going to do the exercises? If you do the exercises, it will work, right? If you pay the price of mastering your body and mind, you'll get results, right? But our training is much more enjoyable, much simpler. It doesn't involve the kind of muscle fatigue that strength training requires, you know? So yes, it works for everyone. There's support, and you can watch it in your own privacy. This is something really important. Total, absolute confidentiality. Privacy is something men don't like to expose. So the support is directly with us. He watches it in his free time, you know? When he's all alone, when it's his own private moment, he watches and trains until he fully masters his body, until his body deeply understands this new pattern. Once the body understands this new pattern, it becomes automatic.
Wow, that's true freedom. Or don't you think?
There's even a gift there. We're going to give you a gift for following the podcast here with Janine, 10% off, okay? How will you get it? The link is in the description and the coupon is YouTube, all right? I'm going to give a gift here to the channel's followers. Just type the word YouTube on the payment page and you'll get 10% off.
Wonderful. What a nice gift.